So, guys, I want to talk about AEW, and there's been a bunch of controversies about the Kyle Fletcher and Dustin Rhodes match. And I think what I want to do is that I actually decided to watch that match and I want to break it down to you guys. That, my first thing that I want to say is that, one of the big issues with AEW is that they have matches like this without any build. And I definitely agree that there really was no build for why Kyle Fletcher and Dustin Rhodes would just resort to a street fight. Like, quite honestly, if you did promos where Kyle Fletcher's saying things like, I intentionally hurt Adam Cole, and then Dustin Rhodes said, I want to put you out of your misery, that would be something. Or if you did something like, you see like the Don Callis family attack Dustin and Sammy, and let's say Dustin and Sammy wanted to be in the AEW Tag Team Championship Tournament. They say something like, hey, you know what? We've been champion for almost 365 days. We work well together. You know what? I want it all, really. Like, Dustin wants to get all out of life, really. He wants to be, have another title with him, So then you have the Don Callis family cost him, or Kyle Fletcher cost him, and then, he's hell-bent. And then you see, Dustin say, Sam, I want nobody out there. And then Kyle Fletcher is telling people, I want nobody out there just because I want to take care of business myself, really. I want to prove that we're worth something. Or we did promos where Kyle Fletcher is saying something like the Don Callis family, Okada has a title. So, I want a title too. I want all the titles to go to the Don Callis family. Like, if you kind of set things up a lot better, that would make the story kind of flow more. Then there's that other controversy too of like, why won't you have a match like this at Forbidden Door? And I totally agree with this, that, Dustin is getting up there in age. He's like 57, I believe they say. But the problem with Dustin is that wouldn't you want him to be on pay-per-views? Because, he's done pay-per-view quality work. That match with him and Cody Rhodes is considered one of the best matches ever, one of the best matches in AEW, one of the matches that put a lot of attention on the company, really. So wouldn't you want to do something like say, hey, you know what, now let's make Dustin a pay-per-view type of wrestler, really. And I totally agree with it. Like, if you want to do a passing of the torch, from Dustin to Kyle, really, generation versus generation, I would have done this. I would have had a match tonight, and then what would happen is that during this match, Kyle gets desperate, and then he attacks Dustin with a weapon. There's a DQ. Then they both bloody each other, and then they set up a street fight for London. Really, like, that's how I would have done that. Because wouldn't you want Kyle Fletcher to win in front of like 11,000 plus people, not 10 times as less in Chicago, really? Another thing that I'm going to say about Chicago before I forget was that I was really mad with them announcing that World's End is in Chicago. Like, wouldn't you want to do something? Like, wouldn't you want to do something where you announce it at All In, saying we're doing a Chicago residency, but hey, Chicago crowd, we also got a pay-per-view for you. Then you launch fireworks to make everybody excited. Or wouldn't you want to do something like Tony Khan comes to the middle of the ring and he says an important announcement about Chicago, and then he announces the pay-per-view. Like, just like having a little graphic during the show was not good, really. They could have done more to announce World's End, really. But to get back to my point, really, is that you would want Kyle Fletcher to win in front of a large group of people, really. Just to show that he's a big deal, get a large boom and reaction, really. That would be a better, flow, really. And then also with Forbidden Door, they're probably going to do this pattern, and this pattern, which I see with AEW, is that sometimes when they have pay-per-views that are, not that apart, really, they're going to, throw in a lot of last-minute matches, and that's usually how AEW works. And that's kind of been an issue with, the company. Like, they don't have storylines throughout the card, really. They just throw in a lot of last-minute matches. I think they're going to do MJF versus Mark Briscoe. They built towards that. And then you have Swerve and Okada announced, and there was really no build. It's not like they said, let's do a match, this is on, really. They have not really kind of done that. Even with the Hurt Syndicate and the tag team tournament, they've not really done that. And with Kyle Fletcher and Dustin, you had an excellent opportunity to make a match with a story and a build, really. Have them kind of get a little out of hand in Chicago, get people riled up, really, and say, okay, we're going to, do this at the pay-per-view. and that's actually when you crown Kyle Fletcher. Like that would have been most appropriate. And I think another issue with this is that this is kind of one of the big problems with AEW is that they kind of spoil a lot of their pay-per-view matches on main events of regular shows, really. Like there's no really sense of, what, you can do better by holding things off. Not by saying, okay, what, like you did Athena and Tony Storm, they fought each other a little bit in tag team wrestling, really. But wouldn't it be better if you said they never touched until Forbidden Door? So, again, this was a great opportunity to put Kyle Fletcher over, but you blew it in Chicago in front of 1,200 people versus 12,000 people. Like sometimes, holding things off is better. So I also want to talk about the match that I actually had no problems with the match. I know like there was a bunch of people saying that it really hurt the Texas Death Match. And I understand why, but I really think that the thing that I would say is ultimately it doesn't, because it's just the characters are way too different, really. Like Dustin Dustin is serious, but you can't take him completely seriously because he was Goldust for so many years in the Attitude Era. And then you can't take Kyle Fletcher that seriously because Kyle Fletcher jokes around a little bit. So when I watched this match, it didn't feel like it hurt the Texas Death Match. And they also did a bunch of different things, in my opinion. I think like the most memorable spot of the Texas Death Match is the fork, and then also the hanging and a lot of blood, really, and the interference and everything like that, really. When I think about this match, the things you remember is the sunset flip pile driver and the Shattered Dreams with thumbtacks. So I don't really feel like, oh, well, this is just, it almost erases it, but it does create diminishing return, because I do agree with that thing too, that sometimes when you have so many hardcore matches or when you over-rely on that, like I know I think it was 2 years ago, they kind of over-relied on putting people through burning tables or Mark Briscoe through burning tables. If you always kind of do that, every single time you have a bunch of special shows, or you go do a residency, if you do that every 2 or 3 weeks, it doesn't become as special, really. And then the other thing that I would say about that is you're also going to Philadelphia, and that's also a concern because they may be like, this is the ECW arena, so let's have a tables match. Oh, this is the ECW arena. Let's do something like let's have blood and guts, when that could be at All Out, really. Oh, this is the ECW arena. Let's have people jump off a scaffolding and do other crazy shit. When you can say that for Darby and Moxley at All Out in a more violent, hardcore type of match, really. So sometimes when you have residencies or you want to do something special for the crowd, you have to ultimately say that your best crowd, your biggest crowds are always the pay-per-view crowd. So sometimes when you have all that stuff, kind of blown a little too early, like a little prenatal, premature, that's not good, really, because then it's almost like, why would I want to go to the pay-per-views if you're already just kind of repeating the same thing, or you already kind of spoiled your pay-per-view matches on regular television, really. This is one of the reasons why I kind of say that if I was booking an AEW, I would have pay-per-views have 20, I'd book 20 matches for a pay-per-view. And what I would do is I would say, hey, Tony, out of these 20 matches, here are 10 matches that work on your pay-per-view the best. And the other 10 matches will work on television and Collision, Dynamite and Collision, next couple of weeks, really. And it's going to help you towards your next pay-per-view. Or what I would also do is say, hey, maybe we can, say some matches for future pay-per-views. So I think that that's kind of one of the issues as well, really. Is, like I said, just, blowing a lot of stuff on the regular television programming. But go back to my point, and I'm sorry I went on a tangent, is I 100% agree that is one of the issues, is that, as some people say, it diminishes All Out, but I think it probably diminishes future pay-per-views by doing this too much. I meant All In, the Texas Death Match thing. But I would also kind of say as well that the match had, what a lot of people say about AEW, a lack of realism. Dustin Rhodes gets a pile driver on 2 folding tables. He kicks out at 2. After a Canadian top rope Canadian destroyer through a table, Kyle Fletcher kicks out at 2, really. It reminds me of what happened with the Spanish Fly off the top rope, the Spanish Fly off the top of the cage, like how Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher went on for like 10 more minutes. Like, a lot of these matches have very bad formatting because usually they need to say, here are all the things we want to do. Here's like 20 spots. And again, use ChatGPT if you need to and say, hey, what's a good order for all these? Here are all the sequences we need to do, really. Because, again, there's a lot of spots that could have ended this match. Instead of just saying, hey, you know what, we're going to do something like have, do spots out of order. Because like I said, when you have somebody receive a pile driver onto chairs, really, and you go on for another like 5 or 10 minutes, that's not a good look. When you have somebody do a Canadian destroyer through a chair, through a table, and a little while later they're winning the match, really, it's not a good look, really. So I really think with AEW, like I said, I think that they have to do two things. It's always good to like figure out the right sequence, and then sometimes you can take some things out, and then what you do is that you put it in a database, put it on a computer, and be like, hey, we want these spots, really. Here are some spots we came up with, and save it for a future day, really. But I do agree that match lacked a bunch of realism because obviously, you hit some of the tombstone pile driver on 2 folding tables. They're over 50 years old. That would take out a normal person, really. Oh, well, you do something like you do a Canadian destroyer into tables off the top rope. There's a few different effects. Like a flip pile driver would injure somebody, and then through a table would injure somebody more, and then off the top rope would do a lot of damage. Like you're almost receiving you're almost doing like a triple finisher in a way. 3 times the power. So it's not. It takes away realism, and it's like what a lot of people say, where it hurts AEW because it looks cartoony. It's just like when you had Pentagon Jr. and somebody else exchange like Canadian destroyers and roll up pile drivers over and over, really. Like that, people are going to say that's not realistic, really, because and then I can't believe that because there's no build and there's no threat or whatever, really. It's just like with Brock Lesnar when they did that storyline where nobody kicked out of the F5, really, and then Roman was the only person to do that at WrestleMania. So if they did something where you had you were trying to be entertaining, you did Dustin Rhodes, you did Goldust, you did Dustin Rhodes coming back as the natural in WWE, and then you had Brock Lesnar him with the F5, and then he got up, and then you hit him with another F5, then he got up, really, and he did that 4 or 5 times on Raw, and then it's not that as special, really. So sometimes that's also an issue too when you keep doing that sequence of diminishing returns, because there are people who will say, okay, even though I know that this is fake, I expect some realism. I don't want this like Combat Zone wrestling where somebody gets hit with like 10 or 12 light tubes and then they still keep on going, really, because then I'm watching really I'm watching like a video game on hard mode where it takes like 100 hits to defeat somebody. And like I said, it's entertaining, but it lacks realism. And some people may say, okay, that's just why I don't watch, really, because it feels like I'm playing a video game with characters who are on the hard mode setting where it takes a lot to defeat them. So it feels like that, or it feels like a bullshit card. Or it feels like almost like an Austin Powers, where Austin Powers was trying to defeat this girl, and he kept like doing like moves and hitting her with a bazooka and everything like that, and it keep on going, really. The next thing that I will say, and I think the final thing, is just like entertainment versus realism. And I think on the entertainment side, I was very much entertained by the match. And sometimes what happens with AEW, and this is true professional wrestling, is people suspend their disbeliefs. And we've talked about this with Pulp Fiction. Like, Pulp Fiction is not a realistic movie. Samuel L. Jackson shoots somebody. He recites Ezekiel 25:17. He shoots somebody 3 times. And then also, he has a bit of a conversation, and then they leave an apartment. That's not realistic, because this is in Los Angeles, and I believe after the LA riots, really. So do you think, like, in downtown Los Angeles, that would really happen, really? I live in an apartment complex, and if the exact same thing happened next door, Do you think that there will be cops? Do you think there will be screaming? Do you think other people will be paying attention to all this? Yes. So, or then also that thing in Pulp Fiction where they turn around, they accidentally shoot Marv in the face, and there's blood all over the back. Do you think that realistically, they would make it to somebody's house and spend like maybe 30 minutes there cleaning and everything like that? Really, no. There would be cops and everything. There would be people reporting it. But the thing about Pulp Fiction is that it's such an entertaining movie. There's dark comedy, there's action, there's suspense, there's twists and turns in that you don't really care about the realism. And I even think with this match is that there's so many like spots and a spectacle, and people like Dustin, and people want to see Kyle Fletcher be recognized as what he really is. That's somebody who could be a future star one day. Like, that he needs a title. He deserves a singles title because he's done so much, really. We don't want to see him become like an Anthony Bowens where he's a little lost. So sometimes when you have all these things playing, a lot of people are like, what, I don't care about the realism. I care more about the spectacle because I like what's going on in the ring, and I also like the characters. So sometimes it's that controversy in professional wrestling, because just like I said, you can apply that to any match. Like Andre the Giant versus Hogan, the fact that, Andre was a bigger, massive person, really. So there are people who will suspend their disbeliefs. Or you do something like Bryan Danielson versus Batista and Randy Orton. The fact that Bryan Danielson was on a stretcher, he comes off the stretcher, wins the match, really. That happens everywhere in professional wrestling, that the entertainment takes over the realism. And I think in this match, it comes down to personal taste. But I'm more entertained from this match than anything. So even if it is a bit of the bullshit card, then you go along with it. It's called stupefective, I believe. Stupid effective. It's stupid effective. It kind of reminds me of what people said about Gurren Lagann, stupid effective. That these guys are saying the willpower and the power of the human spirit being motivated is stronger than the Big Bang, which has the most kinetic energy than anything in this universe. So yeah, it's just that thing as well, really. I think that we all look at it differently. Well, there's some issues with this, yes. Like I said before, it's like it was good, but it could have been greater. And I think that's what the issue with AEW, that everything feels like maybe a C+, but it can be an A+ if they structure things better, either in the matches and how they built matches and when they do these matches. And ultimately what the end result is. When the end result was Kyle Fletcher becoming the TNT champion and saying that he goes from just a Joe Schmo with no title and a bunch of ROH titles to actually somebody with an AEW title, and that could lead him to bigger and better things, really. And like I said, I think that getting him to that point is good. It helps him out a lot, really. And that's the goal, mission accomplished. But they could have made that moment way better. Like I said, it's a C- when it could have been an A+. And that's kind of why people struggle with AEW, because there's a lot of moments that are C- when it could be an A+.